Good evening. A man in his 50s was shot dead last night in the parking lot of the Mandarin restaurant in Burlington. Police say the victim had been dining at the buffet before being shot outside.
On a quiet Tuesday evening in Burlington, Ontario, a single gunshot shattered the calm of suburban life. It was April 29, 2025, and what happened in the parking lot of the Mandarin restaurant would expose a hidden world of loyalty, betrayal, and deadly consequences. The victim was Craig McIlquham, though most knew him by a different name. The shooting was swift, professional, and precise, but nothing about this case would prove simple. Tonight, we're diving deep into a murder that remains unsolved, exploring the double life of a man caught between family and the criminal underworld, and examining why some secrets are worth killing for. This is the story of Craig McIlquham, and the hit that shocked a community. Craig McIlquham lived two lives, and most people only knew about one of them. To his neighbors in Oakville, he was Craig Brown, a quiet, 55-year-old family man who kept regular hours at the local gym, frequented neighborhood diners, and seemed to blend seamlessly into suburban life. Self-employed, according to official records, he drove his kids to school, maintained his lawn, and rarely drew attention to himself. But within the shadowy world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, Craig McIlquham was someone entirely different. He was a patched member of the Hells Angels, not a hanger-on or weekend warrior, but a full insider with deep connections across Ontario's criminal network. This duality wasn't accidental. In organized crime, maintaining a legitimate front is survival 101. Craig had mastered the art of living in plain sight while operating in the shadows. His suburban cover was so effective that even longtime neighbors were shocked when news of his murder broke. So how does a man balance little league games with criminal enterprise? How do you compartmentalize a life where one wrong move could destroy everything? According to those who knew both sides of Craig, it required discipline. One former associate, speaking anonymously, described him as methodical. Craig didn't take unnecessary risks. He kept his world separate. That's how he stayed out of trouble for so long. But that careful balance came with a price. Living a double life means double the enemies, double the stress, and double the chances that your past will catch up with you. Craig's Hells Angels affiliation wasn't recent. Intelligence files suggest he'd been connected to the organization for over a decade, rising through the ranks during a period when the club was consolidating power across southern Ontario. Unlike flashier members who courted media attention, Craig operated quietly, making him both valuable and potentially vulnerable. Because in the criminal underworld, the people who know the most secrets often become the biggest threats. By 2022, cracks were beginning to show in Craig's carefully constructed life. That year, Halton Regional Police received intelligence that Craig McIlquham had become a target. The threats weren't random. They were specific, calculated, and tied to internal conflicts within organized crime circles. Someone wanted Craig neutralized, and according to sources, those threats were credible enough to warrant police attention. But here's what's fascinating. Craig seemingly ignored these warnings. Friends and associates described a man who refused to let fear dictate his routine. He continued his regular activities, maintained his public profile, and showed no signs of going into hiding. Was this confidence, denial, or something else entirely? Craig didn't scare easy, recalls someone who knew him during this period. If someone had a problem with him, he'd meet them face to face. He didn't believe in running. This attitude might seem admirable, but in Craig's world, it could be deadly. The criminal underworld operates on reputation and respect. Showing fear can be interpreted as weakness, but ignoring legitimate threats can be suicide. What makes Craig's response even more puzzling is that he wasn't naive about violence. His name had surfaced in multiple police intelligence files over the years, always connected to serious criminal activity, though charges never stuck. He understood the stakes better than most. So why didn't he take precautions? 3 theories emerge. First, Craig may have believed he'd resolved whatever conflict generated the threats. Criminal disputes are often settled through negotiation, compensation, or displays of strength that don't involve violence. Second, he might have been trapped by his own reputation. Taking obvious security measures could signal weakness to rivals or paranoia to allies, both dangerous perceptions in his world. Third, and most troubling, Craig may have known exactly what was coming and chose to face it head-on rather than spend his remaining time looking over his shoulder. Whatever his reasoning, the threats proved prophetic. Someone was indeed planning Craig's death. They were just patient enough to wait for the perfect moment. To understand Craig's murder, we need to examine the legal case that nearly destroyed his life years before a bullet finished the job. In 2019, Craig McIlquham was swept up in Project Hobart, a massive police investigation targeting illegal gambling and money laundering operations across Ontario. The scope was enormous: 30 individuals charged, millions in assets seized, and a criminal network that reached into legitimate businesses, sports betting, and offshore accounts. Craig faced serious charges: possession of a restricted weapon, bookmaking, and, most significantly, committing offenses for the benefit of a criminal organization. That last charge was the killer, carrying potential decades in prison and designed specifically to dismantle organized crime operations. Project Hobart wasn't just about gambling. It exposed a sophisticated financial network where dirty money was cleaned through legitimate businesses, sports betting was rigged, and violence lurked behind every transaction. Craig wasn't a peripheral figure. Investigators placed him near the center of operations. For 3 years, Craig lived under the shadow of these charges. His movements were monitored, his associations scrutinized, and his future uncertain. The case dominated headlines and put enormous pressure on everyone involved. Then, in 2022, something unexpected happened. All charges against Craig were dropped. The reason? Trial delays. Canada's Supreme Court had established that criminal proceedings exceeding 30 months violate constitutional rights to timely justice. Project Hobart's complexity meant the estimated trial duration was 41 months, well beyond the legal limit. Craig walked free on a technicality, but freedom came with a price. Everyone now knew he'd been targeted by police, identified as a key player in organized crime, and positioned to potentially testify against former associates. In the criminal world, being labeled a potential informant can be a death sentence, even if you never cooperated. Did Project Hobart's collapse create the conditions for Craig's murder? Did former associates worry about what he might reveal if pressured again? Or did rivals see his legal troubles as evidence of weakness, making him a target for elimination? The timing is suggestive. Craig was killed 3 years after his charges were dropped. Long enough for tensions to simmer, grudges to develop, and plans to be made. April 29, 2025, started like any other Tuesday for Craig McIlquham. But by evening, he would be dead. The timeline investigators reconstructed reveals a man following his normal routine with no apparent awareness that death was stalking him. Around 4 p.m., Craig was captured on security footage at a gas station in Oakville. He appeared relaxed, alone, and unhurried, filling his tank and buying coffee like thousands of other suburban commuters. But then his movements became more interesting. At approximately 6:30 p.m., Craig was spotted near an industrial park known to police as a meeting location for outlaw bikers. This wasn't his neighborhood, and he had no obvious business there. Surveillance footage shows his black SUV in the area for roughly 20 minutes before departing. Was he meeting someone? Delivering something? Settling a dispute? Police found no evidence of a planned meeting, no text messages, no calls, no advance coordination. Yet Craig's presence there was clearly intentional. 2 hours later, Craig would be dead in a Burlington parking lot. The gap between 6:30 p.m. and his arrival at the Mandarin restaurant remains mysterious. Where did Craig go? What did he do? And most importantly, did someone follow him from that industrial park to his final destination? What we know is that Craig made no effort to vary his route or check for surveillance. His phone records show no unusual activity. He wasn't using burner devices or taking counter-surveillance measures. For someone who'd lived under police scrutiny and received credible death threats, his behavior seems remarkably careless. Unless, of course, he was exactly where someone wanted him to be. The Mandarin restaurant on Fairview Street was bustling with Tuesday evening diners when Craig McIlquham arrived shortly after 8 p.m. What happened next would be over in minutes, but the investigation would stretch on for months. Craig parked his black SUV toward the rear of the lot, an area with limited security camera coverage. Was this strategic positioning by someone who knew the location, or simple coincidence? Witnesses inside the restaurant later described seeing a man who seemed to know where he was going, calm, unhurried, purposeful. But here's the puzzle. No evidence suggests Craig ever entered the restaurant. No receipts, no staff interactions, no confirmed sightings inside. So what was he really doing there? Between 8:10 and 8:19 p.m., 3 separate diners noticed a second figure approaching Craig's vehicle. The descriptions were frustratingly vague: dark clothing, hood up, face angled downward. No one witnessed a conversation, no shouting, no visible confrontation. At 8:21 p.m., a sound like a firecracker echoed across the parking lot. One shot, then silence. Several diners rushed outside to find Craig lying between his open driver's door and the pavement. An off-duty nurse attempted CPR, but the single gunshot wound to the chest had been immediately fatal. The first police cruiser arrived within 4 minutes. Impressive response time that unfortunately meant nothing to Craig. The killer had vanished completely. No shell casings were found, suggesting a revolver was used. No footprints or tire marks provided clues about the shooter's escape route. Most frustratingly, the restaurant's external cameras didn't cover the angle where Craig had parked. This wasn't random violence. Someone had studied the location, planned the approach, and executed a professional hit with surgical precision. But how did the shooter disappear so completely? Witnesses saw no one running, no vehicles speeding away, no signs of panic or haste. 3 possibilities emerge. The killer had a predetermined escape route through nearby buildings. A second vehicle was positioned for immediate extraction. Or most chillingly, someone was monitoring the situation from inside the restaurant, providing real-time intelligence to coordinate the attack. Halton Regional Police knew they were dealing with something unusual from the moment they secured the Mandarin parking lot. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong, or a domestic dispute turned deadly. This was a professional execution. Within hours, investigators identified a vehicle of interest, a gray, newer model Honda Civic with dark-tinted windows and black alloy rims. Multiple witnesses had noticed the car in the area before and after the shooting, but descriptions of the driver remained maddeningly vague. The Honda became the investigation's white whale, clearly significant but impossible to trace. Despite public appeals and extensive surveillance review, the vehicle was never definitively identified. Forensic evidence was minimal. The single gunshot suggested someone confident enough to kill with 1 bullet, a professional or at least someone with significant firearms experience. The lack of shell casings pointed to a revolver, harder to trace than semi-automatic weapons that leave more evidence. But the investigation's biggest obstacle wasn't technical, it was cultural. In the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, cooperation with police is not just discouraged, it's potentially fatal. The code of silence that protects these organizations from law enforcement also makes solving murders nearly impossible. Potential witnesses, who might have crucial information, simply won't talk. Associates, who could provide context about Craig's final days, refuse to engage. Even family members, while grieving, understand that saying too much could put them in danger. Detective work becomes an exercise in reading between the lines, following money trails, and hoping someone eventually breaks ranks. In Craig's case, that breakthrough never came. Months after the shooting, investigators are left with theories rather than evidence, suspicions rather than proof. They know Craig was deliberately targeted. They believe the killing was connected to his criminal associations. But knowing and proving are two very different things. What really happened to Craig McIlquham? Without arrests or confessions, we're left to examine the possibilities. Craig may have violated Hell's Angels rules or protocols, triggering internal discipline. The organization has a documented history of violently enforcing loyalty and secrecy. His legal troubles from Project Hobart could have raised suspicions about his reliability. The criminal world operates on reputation and fear. A financial disagreement, territorial dispute, or broken agreement could have escalated to murder. Craig's meeting at the industrial park, hours before his death, suggests ongoing business negotiations. Craig's extensive knowledge of criminal operations made him dangerous to former associates. Even though he never cooperated with police, the potential that he might change his mind could have been unacceptable to others. In Craig's world, vengeance can simmer for years before boiling over. Someone with a long-standing grievance may have finally decided to settle accounts permanently. Each theory fits certain facts while leaving others unexplained. What's clear is that Craig's murder was carefully planned by someone with detailed knowledge of his routines and vulnerabilities. The professional execution suggests this wasn't amateur hour. The clean getaway indicates significant planning. The location choice shows someone familiar with surveillance blind spots. Most tellingly, the complete silence from Craig's criminal associates suggests they either know exactly what happened or are too terrified to speak. Craig McIlquham's story is ultimately about the price of living between two worlds. For years, he successfully balanced suburban family life with criminal enterprise. But that balancing act eventually collapsed in a Burlington parking lot. His murder remains officially unsolved, another cold case in the files of Halton Regional Police. The gray Honda Civic was never found. The shooter was never identified. Justice remains elusive. But Craig's death wasn't meaningless, it was a message. Someone wanted him dead badly enough to risk a public execution. Someone believed his continued existence was unacceptable. Someone had the resources and connections to plan and execute. A professional hit. The code of silence that protects organized crime also ensures that Craig's killer may never face consequences. His family is left with grief and unanswered questions. The community is left wondering who among them might be capable of such calculated violence. What do you think happened that night in Burlington? Was it internal justice, business gone wrong, or something even more sinister? The investigation continues, and police are still seeking information about that gray Honda Civic. Someone out there knows the truth about Craig McIlquham's final moments. Someone knows who pulled the trigger. Someone knows why Craig had to die. Until they speak, Craig's story remains unfinished, a reminder that some secrets are deadly and some truths may never see the light. What do you think really happened to Craig McIlquham? I'd love to hear your theories and thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might shed light on details we haven't considered. If you enjoyed this deep dive into an unsolved case, it would mean a lot if you could give this video a like and consider subscribing for more true crime investigations. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Thank you for watching.